So this is Michael Smith. He's my brother, and he works for Yahoo.
Yes, I do stuff. This is my brother Christopher, and he works for Group M, and he does stuff too. I don't know what he does, but he does stuff.
So if you're tweeting or Facebooking or all the social media stuff, there's some hashtags. TEDxCQ GDT, something you're going to learn about as we talk. And how you use it? At TEDx Watching Dreampipe, which is his Twitter handle. Crush it on the cowbell.
On the cowbell. Imported from Singapore. Okay, so we don't come bringing answers as much as we are here to question ourselves and to question kind of our philosophies. We think that's the spirit of TED, is to ask questions. And we think hopefully through this, all of us will get some actionable observations and maybe come away with changing your mind a little bit or coming up with your own viewpoint, maybe even dissimilar to ours.
And we use color to transition ideas, so that kind of helps everybody out. So we're talking about today achieving escape velocity, but achieving escape velocity from Singapore. And that is what escape velocity looks like. Feedback. So escape velocity, it's pretty complex. But like any complex equation, you can have it simplified. You can break it apart, and you can take it piece by piece, which helps understand and solve the problem.
And goal number one. So tonight we're going to talk about things, and I think we're using this term very loosely because you could be working on mobile things, you could be working on payment things, you could be working on product, hardware. So we're going to generically define anything you might be doing as a thing. And therefore, if you're somebody who builds things, you're a thing maker. Make it really simple, okay?
So these are a lot of things that we know, things that we love, things that we use, things that we want.
So all of these things have achieved escape velocity, right? They're universally recognized as something that doesn't really matter where it comes from, but most of them happen to come from the Western world. You agree that they're universally desired, right? So whether it's Twitter, whether it's the iPhone, whether it's a pair of Nike shoes, whether it's a BMW motorcycle or car, you typically don't have to explain to anybody that this is a wanted or desired item around the world.
So not only escape velocity, but they've also reached competitive separation. So they've had the opportunity to move themselves further away from the center of the orbit than their competition. That's how we notice them. And when that happens, it's creating what we call a globally desirous thing, or a GDT. Hey, Henrik. Thanks for joining us.
So one of the takeaways we want to think about is anybody can make things, right? We can all be a thing maker. That's actually not that difficult in this day and age, right? But it's another thing to build something that everybody wants, or is universally desired. So we think things that are desired are much more complex to build than just things. And it's a huge kind of chasm between building things and building things that are desirous.
So let's talk about making things. You can make things from Singapore. You can make things from the region, Southeast Asia. Or you can make things from the globe.
So if you're going to make things from Singapore, one of the things we want to be is to kind of lay down some discrete decisions you make, right? So if Singapore is your goal, so you're in Singapore and you're going to build a startup, own Singapore, right? Don't just go out there and say, I'm from Singapore, I'm going to tackle Singapore. Own Singapore. Be number one in Singapore. So when this happens, we think of, as we look at the Singapore and the region, regional thing makers will want to own you, right? So if there's somebody bigger than you in the region, and they want to be in Singapore, they're going to have to come through you, right? So we're going to keep using GDT a lot. So global think makers may also come to the region, and they may want a piece of the region, which in turn means they may want you. So we think there's some pretty discrete choices as to what you set out to do when you're doing your startups.
Same with if you want to go regional. Seize it right from the beginning. Understand that constraint and decisions within constraints is a very powerful thing to use. So if you're going to do something regionally, own that region. Neutralize the single countries. So just like in the previous slide, we talk about people wanting to own Singapore, you're going to have to neutralize your competitor in Singapore. Now GDT makers, they will definitely want to compete with you, and that's a good thing.
So, yeah, walk to the light. So now this third kind of discrete rule is kind of breaking the other two rules, which is forget about the regions, forget about where you are, forget about what you're trying to do, and just build the best thing. And if you think about our list from before of globally desirous things, you know, somebody just sets out to build the best thing. And then it doesn't really matter where you're from and what you're trying to do other than build the best thing, and for that, the world is your market, right? And we do think, you know, this is a place to do that.
But there are other places that do that as well. You've got the big fish, Silicon Valley, China, India, Brazil, UK, other regions here, our neighbors. They're also trying to do the same exact thing. So I guess that begs the question. Can you build a globally desirous thing from Singapore?
Since we've been here more than 6 months, we speak Singlish. So we believe that you can. And we believe that there's a lot of parallels here for not just you as the think maker or the startup, but also for Singapore, the country, right? That Singapore, the country, can be the center, the hub of innovation for people that want to build these globally desirous things, and that the people that are here doing that can use it as a foundation for doing that. So we think there's a lot of parallels between what the country's trying to do and what the people that are doing startups are also trying to do.
So let's go back to this phrase, escape velocity. So we really like Jeffrey Moore. Jeffrey is the founder of the Chasm Group. He lectures at Stanford. A lot of his lectures are online. He has one recently, he's promoting his new book. His new book's coming out. It's actually entitled Escape Velocity. So some of the stuff that we're talking about is modeled after some of his frameworks.
So we think, you know, Jeffrey Moore in and of himself is probably required reading for anybody doing a startup. I know I've learned a lot from him, but I think, you know, if you look at some of his different books, even Crossing the Chasm, what's I think a little bit different about this model is he's trying to suggest or almost build for you a framework that allows either a startup or an established company to think about discreetly what it is they're doing and what they're building, so that if you have escape velocity, you can, remember you have to keep it, right? You can easily lose it. So think about all the companies that have achieved it and have fallen back, right? Or you could be the startup, what you're trying to do is achieve escape velocity. And this framework is largely similar if you're looking at it from either way. So what we're going to talk about is this framework and kind of how it leads to the steps for you to do this. Did you just lose it? Uh-oh. No power.
It's all right, I can shout. It's back. Thank you.
Magic.
Batteries. So one of the steps is in the discussion of power. So you can't talk about escape velocity without discussing power. There are basically 5 ways that we can talk about power. For this talk, and based on its length, we chose to talk about 2. Offer power and execution power.
So offer power is kind of the first thing to think about. And this is like, what am I making? And how am I, what am I going after? Like, we kind of think of this offer power as like the categories, the businesses that you want to be in. So what is the net differentiation of your flagship offers, right? And this is what we call offer power. It's very important to focus on what this is, because a lot of people don't, choose one thing over another.
And when you decide that you have to make choices, there's typically 3 choices that you can make: differentiation, neutralization, or productivity. Differentiation says, how are we going to be different than our competitors? Neutralization, what do we not have that they do have that we need to fill to now make even.
And then productivity, right? And productivity, is how do I make what I have better and how do I increase my market share? So we think a lot of the following 2 points are sometimes when you're more established or you're maybe even achieve escape velocity and you're trying to protect it, right? So one of the mistakes that we think a lot of companies make is as you look at these different categories or offers you might have, is a lot of people say, hey, let me try to tackle the intersection of them and I'll nail a couple of things at the same time, therefore making a more powerful product.
We think that's failure. If you go ahead and try to tackle 2, you're probably going to fail. You're probably even going to fail bigger if you try to tackle all 3 at the same time. What we're proposing is to try to focus, and focus on one of those 3 categories to gain success.
And notice we color outside the lines, because that's legal. So if you take these 3 things and you're saying, hey, I'm going to focus on differentiation, and we think that's important because we think as startups or maybe as newcomers, differentiation is probably the most important thing to try to tackle. We think this is also the same for Singapore. So differentiation is what we think can create the wow factor. Got wow in there for you. The innovation, the why didn't I think of that, and kind of what we think leads down the path of design, right? Differentiation is very important.
So when you don't focus and you try to tackle too many things, this is what product development typically looks like. Chaos, confusion. But if you stop, find that one thing, we're choosing differentiation, and you decide to focus on it, you have a much better rate of success.
So the next thing is, now you've maybe chosen what you're going to do, you have to execute, right? So we think the other big power grid here is execution power. And this is, if you think of you're the founder, if you're the executives of a startup and you're leading the ship, we think at the executive power level, you have to be able to create change of mind, both in yourself and in your employees, right? Because maybe you need to shift focus. You need to have the confidence to disrupt. We think this is really important. If you think about the power of disruption and a lot of things that have become extremely famous, if you listen to Steve Jobs when they created the iMac, they didn't set out to say, let's make another box. They said, let's disrupt the entire PC industry. And everybody laughed at them, right? So we think the confidence in yourself that you can also instill in your employees to disrupt is very powerful.
And Steve's been top of mind this week, obviously, because of his retirement from Apple. Malik, who's a writer, runs some conferences in the States, he said something that we thought was quite interesting about Steve. He says it instilled him the confidence to disrupt himself. And has done some really interesting things, especially in the video telecom spaces. And then along the same vein, Jennifer was talking about innovation and how innovation needs to start inward. So we think that these are some of the key things on the execution power grid.
So one of the things that we think happens a lot, and I think this happens a lot, especially in Singapore, is this notion of whatever you're going to do, let's take the safe bet, right? Because, the word means itself, it's safe, right? But if you look at a lot of the things that have been disruptive or that have changed the world, they weren't the safe bet, right? They were a calculated risk. So it's not necessarily doing something completely crazy, but actually trying to do something to break the norms, to bust out of the pattern that we normally find ourselves in. So we think it's important that, as you look at doing this from Singapore, that people think about taking these calculated risks.
And eventually, enough calculated risks plus enough successes will lead to that globally desirous thing that we're talking about. So we have just a couple more minutes. So we want to kind of wrap this thing up. If we look at 3 things, core value, key metrics, and challenge, we can list these and say our core value, from what we've discussed so far, is to gain separation. The key metric, be unmatchable in our sector. And the challenge, just how far can we push our product and our company?
If we kind of bring this back to Singapore, because this is is where we are. Singapore is this amazing startup ecosystem, right? I mean, just look up, we're in a bar on a Wednesday night talking about stuff like this to give you a sense of how far Singapore's come. It's got an amazing investment ecosystem, law, human capital, right? And there's even enough, ease of use to bring other people into the country when you're trying to create your startups. It's got amazing infrastructure, we think a great quality of life.
So let's relook at the core values based on those things for Singapore. Let's look at, in the future, rewarding risk. That's a lot of times how we get to our greatest successes. Let's try to eat the big fish. Don't be afraid of Silicon Valley. Go after those companies. And you don't have to go to Silicon Valley to compete with Silicon Valley. You can stay in Singapore and do the same. And the challenge is for you to achieve escape velocity.
So a lot of people might think you can't do that from here. And granted, there's not a lot of huge success stories to say that it's proven, but we think you can do it from Singapore. We think that's what's amazing about what's happening here in this time and what's going on with startups.
This is how you get a hold of us and can follow us on how we think. DreamPipe. I'm Groove Monkey, and we'll be talking more about global things.
Thank you very much.